Hey everyone, Brian here again. Welcome back to the Driveway Marketing Podcast. We're going to have an amazing discussion today with Julie B. Say hi, Julie.
Hey everyone.
So, Julie, I will tell you, I found Julie on LinkedIn, where probably a lot of our guests we found. And so, Julie posted something about being an author, like the overnight success that took 3 years to get there, right? So, she just published a book called, what is it called again?
It's called Burned: How Business Owners Can Overcome Burnout and Fuel Success.
So when I saw Burnout, I was like, I just raised my hand and said, sign up. And says every owner, every friend of mine, we're all burned out. We're all burning the candles from every side. We're all going 300 miles an hour with no breaks, right? That's just the nature of entrepreneurship. And so as everyone's growing, we just gotta we gotta like figure that out. So one, I gotta ask because people in the people listening, so what made you decide to write a book?
What made
Like,
me decide to write a book? It's that part has been a bucket list item for me. I've always wanted to write a book. I've written 3 manuscripts that I didn't take as far as putting into a book. So, but this one was the one because of what I experienced, what I've talked with other business owners about their burnout experiences, and then the more I study it, the more I just realize how important it is for us to, address it in the business owner community. And that's how I got here. So it's really not that glamorous. I mean, there's a lot behind it, but
oh, right.
honestly,
Oh, it just happens in 3 weeks, right? It's like you can write it in a weekend, right? You can write a book in a weekend.
yeah, no, I started writing this book in October of 2021 and it came out June 18th, 2024. So that by itself was
Oh,
about a
that's
two
good.
and a half year process.
So, and one of the reasons I'm calling this out in the podcast is that I think it's Brian Tracy or one of these big consulting guys. He'll be in a room with 1,000 people and say, "Who wants to write a book?" And 2/3 of the room raise their hand, and then it says, "How many people started it?" 100 people raise their hand. Then how many people finished it? And 2 people raise their hand, right? So, finish as someone who's written a book, published it. I did self publishing. Julie did traditional. We may talk about that or not. As someone that did that, worked with several clients to help them do it as kind of as a business card. It's a daunting task, but it also puts you in category one in your industry, right? So the more you further you go along, and as a home services business guy, I have a personal friend that he knew writing a book was important. So he wrote a booklet. He's in a really simple business. I don't know. He's like landscaping, and he put together like a 40-page little basic little book, and that goes with his, sales proposals. And then the clients go, "What's this?" He goes, "Well, it's my book. I didn't want to write a big book, so I only wanted to write a little book. So I wrote a little book." He wrote a little. So that's amazing. So I gotta ask out. So burnout. So is it because I've had too much coffee? Is it burnout, or is it what's the challenge?
Yeah, burnout is one of those things that I think from what I've studied and researched, we all experience a little bit differently, and everybody has different threshold. The reason that I went down this path is that somewhere between and different studies at different times vary, but it's usually between like 50 to 70% of business owners are burned out. And my thing is I grew up in a small town in West Virginia where community was really important. And it's only in hindsight looking back that I realized the reason our community was what it was, is because of small business owners, because, the dentist who would donate to the T-ball team to make sure that they had uniforms, or the local chiropractor who, worked on student athletes for a reduced cost so they could continue playing sports. Like these things, they kind of appeared to me after the fact, or the local car mechanic who would work on credit for some families who didn't have the money to pay right then and there, but would still take care of them. So I I went down this path because I know how important small businesses are to our local communities, and I think that's like my bigger why. But uh, it does. It presents for everybody differently. There's usually attentional burnout, emotional, and physical. And unfortunately, physical is usually where we catch it the first time, and that's you get sick a lot. You can't get enough sleep. Like there's not enough sleep in the world to fix how tired you are. Those typical symptoms that you hear of. My goal in the book is to try to help people catch it before it gets all the way to that so they can turn it around, especially business owners, because like going to the doctor and having them tell you have too much stress and that you need to do less, you hear it, but you don't know how to actually. implement having less to do.
And I think also too, you made something really interesting that I picked up on is that, the sense of community, right? As a business owner, right? So there's a joke that says you want to get anything done, go to the busiest guy in town.
Mhm.
But the reality of it is that guy is probably busy because he's connected to the community, right? Because he's
Yeah.
giving back. He's doing that. I know probably about 10 years ago or so, was super busy, was trying to transition from kind of working for companies, kind of back to working for myself again. And I was stuck. And right. So I just said, hey, how do I do this? And I was really fortunate that a client at the time, Tony Robbins, was an investor in his company. And so I had a chance to go to Tony Robbins events. So if you haven't gone, I know some people listen to this will think it's crazy. It's all woo woo. I will tell you that my entire family is a bunch of firewalkers. We've all walked on fire. My kids were both teenagers when they did it. My oldest son was 14 when he did it, and he did it again when he was 20. And my youngest son did it when he was 15 or 16, and we did that together. So it was a fun experience. But couple things. One is you have to have a place to talk to people that are like-minded. So
Mhm.
find a mastermind, join other because one of my later guests I'll have on, I won't say who, but she'll talk about civilian. And so we have this little code in our little group. We talk about civilian. The people like they look at you like you're nuts. No,
Mhm.
they're just non-entrepreneur folk who
Yeah.
don't get the fact that, well, what's it like to work all the time? Well, one, we're probably not working. We may be busy, right? But we're not working because we're always thinking.
Mm.
So that's the other part of that. But to one of the things with the Tony thing, back to the community, he said, if you're not giving, you're not living, right? So for me, one of my burnout strategies is I work with local schools. Our local school district has a really interesting entrepreneur program. And so every year I go talk to 11 high schools. I talk to about 300 kids, and then I work with usually 7 to 10 or 12 kids over a period of 3 months and help them kind of build their business. And people are like, "Why don't you tell that to everybody?" I'm like, "Well, because it's my thing." It's like
Mhm.
I don't put it it's not on my website. I mean, I share with people in conversations like we're having a conversation. Because to me, that's a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
that's like, and it's all of a sudden as an entrepreneur for me, like my relief valve is giving. I need to, and for me, I like, and as consultants, we all know I give the same advice to kids as I do adults. I just charge adults a lot of money
Mhm.
because at least when they ignore me, I get some profit out of it. But the kids, I just say, listen, people pay me a lot of money, so you can ignore me and do what they do, or you can do what I suggest, and you'll kind of take it to another level. And so that part's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But so that's interesting. So can you uncork that a little bit about that? So you talk about community. So how would someone utilize that, or how do they identify that as a maybe? And again, and there's no right or wrong answer. How would they identify that as kind of their why? Because that's an unusual term that not a lot of a lot of folks use.
Yeah, I think that, um, from I don't know how somebody would uncover that or unearth that specifically as their why, but I think that if they're giving back to, a lot of business owners that I come across. I mean, I'm one of them. I serve on the board of directors that puts on this huge street festival every year where we turn around and give money back to a lot of local nonprofits based on what's made at the street festival. So that is, I think if you look at yourself and you find yourself kind of naturally drawn to service oriented, and honestly, who's listening to the podcast right now is a lot of home services entrepreneurs and technicians. Service individuals, they wanna serve. I mean, there's a reason you get into this line of work, and there's a reason that, you continue to do that even outside of your work typically, and you're usually always serving somebody, saying yes to something. So, I think just looking at the types of things that you do with your non-work hours will kinda help you figure out what your why is, and if you find that you're volunteering to coach a team or doing what you do or doing what I do, you can probably say, yeah, community is pretty important to me. And there's usually an underlying story to that.
And, and it's interesting because some of the people I talk to, because I live in a community where home service is like it's a massive piece of the industry, right? People are always rehabilitating their homes and renovating and doing that kind of stuff. And I just kind of went and say, well, what do you do besides this? And they just go, I just work all the time. Well, that's
Yeah.
insane. So, but it's amazing that the guy that owns the tile company or cleaning company or whatever, that they give back and they make that part of it. I'm just thinking along the same lines. There's a glass manufacturer that make glass panels and stuff for doors and
Mhm.
commercial stuff like that. And I know they very quietly just, I believe they give free shower doors to elderly people in need. Like and they don't tell anybody about it. They just they pick someone, they hear that someone needs help. They go measure it, they go put it in, they go do their thing. Like they
Yeah, it's
just,
probably one of those things that's really in their core values, even if they don't say it. It's just they probably hire people who have that service orientation and that giving back, that need to give back, that want to be just to give back to the community. Um, and yeah, I mean, I know certain, the services, the trades, they get hit up all the time asking for
right,
special skills
sure.
because a lot of them, but there's a gap in the need and the what the actual supply of those individuals, and that's why they work all the time. But I think it's important to have something. You got to have something else you're doing, um, because otherwise you're going to burn out. Like it's you can't just work all the time nonstop. Um, it's not good, not healthy, and that's the other reason I wrote Burn was to really give people guidance and that give business owners guidance in that because so often we get into burnout for a lot of reasons, but I think a lot of the times, even in our networking groups, even with other entrepreneurs, it's hard for an entrepreneur to say they're burned out. It's hard to kind of get over that, like, well, I chose this, so I kind of, I picked going into business for myself, so I have to deal with this. This is just part of the gig, and it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the gig, but you do have to figure out how to untangle it.
Yeah, that's interesting you said, because you said, I think you said it twice, that people I think a lot of people get into business because they're mad at their boss. I don't know that they get in business because they're drawn to it. Is because
Mhm.
they're mad at someone else saying, "I can do a better job." And then as entrepreneurs, how are we equipped to deal with this
Yeah.
stuff?
They get
So,
in it, they get into it and then realize, "Oh, this
oh
is why
no,
my
I have
boss maybe did this or that or was upset
I'm
with me
working
that one
90 hours
day."
a week and making less than I was making. I could go work at
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A for $20 an hour, make more money. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have a question for you. So you talked about networking groups, right? So for an entrepreneur, I have an opinion about this. I'm curious about yours. Do they have to be a local networking group, or can they be? Are there other, or should it? What are some areas? So if I'm burned out,
Mhm.
how do we find out? Is it how do how do you what do you observe as where people can go from a peer point of view to find other? Because we all want to hang out with like-minded people, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't think it has to be local. I think it can be virtual, and actually, I think it's easier to talk about it with strangers than people you know. Because in our, let's just say local chamber of commerce or a local networking group that's organized, we all play a role in those. So when we walk into a room, we may be playing the role of author or successful business owner or, the person that you go to when you need something. And sometimes it's hard to put down that role that we play in order to be able to say something like, I am really struggling in business right now, or my cash flow is way off and I don't know what to do about it. If you are wearing the hat of successful business owner in a chamber of commerce networking situation. So I actually find that, and it's kind of one of the reasons I do what I do. It's easier for people to open up with strangers a lot of the times, specifically like this kind of situation where you've got, people know you for one thing and you don't feel comfortable talking about the other thing. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I have seen that over and over again in my work. Like, I will talk to people who are paying a lot of money to be in groups where they are supposed to get the kind of support they're then paying me to get because they don't feel like, because they're really established, because they've won an award in this group in the past, those types of things. They don't feel like they can go into that group now and say, I'm really struggling. And there is an ego thing. There is something about that. But the bottom line is you got to get support and you need to get support from from someone else who understands what you're going through. So hopefully a business owner is what you're really looking
yeah, and
for.
that's a key one, because I will tell you, I'm in a mastermind. I run another one. So if you're not in a group, you don't need to pay a lot of money. It's always more fun for guys like me if you do pay, because it's good.
Hmm.
But get in a group of some kind. I will tell you that I consider myself a sales professional. And so when I got into the business, like our regular business is we help clients, acquire more clients and get more revenue, because that's one of the things that you have to be able to do as a business owner, right? But this podcast is completely off the mark from that.
Yeah.
because it's not about the tip and trick about doing it. It's about the mind of the person behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And so for the longest time, for a year, I've been identifying a need in my business where we need to have a better, account management strategy. And it took me a year. And by the way, I kept telling it. And so finally someone in my group in April said, so you've been talking about this for 9 months now. So what point is it hurt? At what point does it hurt hard enough where you can actually do something about it? Because
Yeah.
you've been saying it for 9 months. And I went, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. And so, and then part of it was learning how I work, how some systems we had in place, and then realizing this was keeping us from 10xing the size of the business. And I just went ahead and so
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur, I lit that one on fire, became number one because it was preventing everything else. But I had to get called out by peers
Yeah.
going, yeah, yeah, you keep telling that story. At some point, you're going to tell it true. So,
And it's interesting that it took 9 months to get called out about that.
oh, I got called out before, but
Oh,
but I got called out. They were like, So, the group, every group's different, right? So
yeah.
groups are people in the same industry, not in the same industry. They're coach driven. This is a peer group.
Mhm.
This is the purest form of mastermind. They're in my mind, they're the one of the more difficult ones to organize, but also you get the most out of them because they're in all kinds of different industries. The one I run, I'm the coach, kind of the mentor, kind of I'm the one calling out, which is kind of interesting because I got called out. But
Mhm.
when you see the big enough roadblocks, the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same things over and over again, and having someone else help you go through that, like you realize you keep saying the same things and
Yeah.
you're not getting anywhere, and it's preventing you from, taking because you want to get that leap, you want to get your time back, you do whatever you want to do. Sometimes you got to make those leaps. And I find me personally, when I feel like I'm going to throw up, that probably means I'm probably doing the right thing.
Yeah. When a decision makes you feel not well, it's usually, yeah, your gut is telling you something. It may not be the way you wish it would tell you, but it's like, "Hey,
Right.
pay attention to this."
Just
Yeah,
had
it's
that.
interesting.
Just had that conversation with my wife, going, "You hired this person because of what?" No, anyway, no, that's right. So
No, I mean, we business owners, and I even talk about it in my book. Like, there are times when you need to make a decision about something, and you've done your due diligence, and you have as much information as you can about whatever it is. It's not at some point, like your gut tells you what to do. I don't love making decisions just on gut instinct. I always say triangulate that or back it up with something somewhere to support what you're about to do. But your gut instinct is rarely wrong, and the longer you go in business, I think the better it gets just with experience and wisdom. And hiring is one of the things that is so tough. And that's one thing I would say to your audience is, if they're already in business for themselves, they probably know how hard hiring is because they've probably tried to get a contractor to help them or some overflow, just because they're busy. I mean, here in Charlotte, it's almost impossible to get a home services provider to come out for certain things, because they're working with, the residential home builders. But you just have to know going in that 1, it's gonna be tough to hire, but 2, like, if you are, a technician, if you're working for somebody else, uh, you know, just remember that as well because it is, I don't know, a lot of decisions get made on gut instincts, and I wish that people made more decisions with, some more objective-based tools, but sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Sometimes you just have to
yeah,
pull the trigger.
I remember I don't know who told me. I remember early in my career where we sat down and like, okay, we're gonna do a Ben Franklin. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're gonna write out on a piece of paper, pros over here, cons over here. It was some big proposal we were talking about with. I was working for some big dumb company, and then luckily I had a boss that says, listen, we gotta. This is a big deal. Like, we gotta decide because maybe saying no early is the right answer because maybe it isn't a good fit for us and it might break us, and we're gonna spend all this time and effort, and we're still gonna be in last place
Yeah.
or still going to be in second. But why would you do that? And so as entrepreneurs, we always want to get the job. Or I think the other side on this home services side, one of the things I see consistently because the communications aren't there. So I, as a consumer of that product, I would much rather know this thing. Listen, I'm going to have I don't know, I'm going to have new tile on my pool, and it's going to be in 90 days,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna have communications from them in a month from now, 45 days. Like they're gonna keep me abreast of the situation so that
Mhm.
on the 90th day they show up and can do the work in a week,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to in the 90th day they show up and then they go, "What are we doing? Oh, we got to order
Yeah.
tile." Oh, well, we
Yeah.
didn't do that.
It's
You know?
amazing how many problems get solved with communication and expectation setting. And I think that that's one thing, I talk about. One thing I do talk about in my book is the importance of setting expectations with. I mean, you got to set it with yourself. You got to set it with the customers. You got to set it with the people who are working for you, and then you got to make sure you communicate those expectations as well. Because if you just have them in your head, then you're expecting everybody to read your mind. And systems and processes are for this specific example, that's the way that you get that
Right.
done. You've got to have something that does that for you, or a checklist that you've got to send the email or make the phone call, whatever it is.
All
That's
right,
what
I'm
you
gonna
got to do.
stop you there for a second
Yeah.
because I got so I often kid with because I now my team's remote, they're all over the world,
Mhm.
right? So that's one. Is so when so that's a challenge for everybody. And then I often kid that I don't have I give people vials of my tears and saying to put it into their Pantiev. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, you're just supposed to pour what I'm thinking. So so you should be laughing because a lot of people I know, they're like, "What do you mean you don't know what I'm thinking?" Or exactly. So you
Yeah.
have to. It starts with you. This is my opinion because I was um, really the arsonist and the firefighter at the same time. Like
Yeah.
but I realized I had to slow down and say, "Okay, this is what this situation looks like, and here's the 5 things that have to happen in order
Hmm.
for this to do it and this get delivered." And I will say that now I've been working on that for a year plus, and I think I was using it as an excuse not to hire an account manager till I got all that done. Then I
Hmm.
realized that, when I brought this customer service person in, they were gonna help me perfect those systems because I
Yeah.
was doing framework. So, it was a big deal for me to
Hmm.
give that up because I was like, "No one can do this better than me." And I
Yeah.
was like then I'm realized going, "Well, this is
I'm
insane." Like,
like, maybe I'm not that good at it, or no, that's not right. Like, people can do things better than you. I I think one of my favorite tools to use is it's an assessment. It's some people call it the Big Five personality assessment. Some people call it the five factor assessment. There's multiple models. I use the Big Five, and I love that assessment because it not only tells you where you are on traits like imagination or perfectionism, but it lets you know that, hey, not only are you, really kind of high on this, you're in 3% of the population. So 97% of the population actually, like, depending on what your score is and all of that, you not only get a frame of reference for where you are, which you usually know it, but you don't realize how much sometimes,
"Oh,
but
yes."
it also gives you a frame of reference for where everybody else is, and that is something I don't think as a business owner, really as anybody, but especially as a leader, I think leaders need to know themselves very, very, very well, and I don't think that I mean, I love knowing stuff about myself that I didn't know before. I love learning through, and it's usually through assessments of, "Oh, okay, well, it makes sense why I don't like to do this or why I love to do that." Giving things a name, but I use the Big Five mainly because it's like, you can tell what percentage you are compared to everybody else. So, if you're really high in imagination, let's say like I am, I'm a visionary. I'm like out there, I can see 5 years down the road. I can say we're gonna
"Can
ride the
everybody? Isn't that the supposed can
yeah.
everybody?"
No, we're about, depending on where you score, you're 3%. So if you walk into a meeting with your team or your boss or whoever, and they're more on the implementer side, they're lower on the imagination. If you're brainstorming ideas all the time, you're gonna drive them crazy.
"Oh, yeah. I live with one of those."
You're gonna drive them totally nuts because they're just like, "What do we do right now about this then? Like, if you got
That's
this idea,
exactly
well, how do I
"Were you
implement
listening
it?"
to my wife and I this morning over coffee?"
It happens all the time. And so this is why, but it gives you language to use, and it helps you understand, "Oh my gosh, I don't wanna say the weird one, but I'm in the significant minority here. I like to like, no matter which way you score, and even on perfectionism, I'm low on perfectionism. So, but if I'm like, just get something out the door, it can make me seem callous or uncaring to somebody who is high and wants it to be perfect before it goes out the door.
Yep.
But if I don't know that about them or me, we're gonna have a problem there. We're gonna have conflict.
So
So,
hopefully anyone who's listening to this, if they haven't, and we'll list some resources in the
yeah.
show notes of where you can take those tests. If you have an
Mhm,
assessment you can offer, great.
mhm.
We were talking pre-call that I had just done something called the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And so I was an activator communicator, right? So that's high on my list, like command and control, let's get it done kind of stuff. And very low on and this was when they laughed at me about the account management role, was they were laughing at me because empathy was number 34 out of the 34. Like, and like, what do you mean you didn't get this done? So, and I had to get coached. And what does that really mean? And they're all laughing at me because they know me. Just do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then details was low on my list, which I instinctively knew. I just didn't realize it was as low as I thought it was. So by getting that off my plate, I realized I was allowing myself to be a creator, to create more because I'm creating the vision and the mission. And so I'm going to share something that we did as a result of that exercise because I wasn't communicating with everybody. Again, I've got people in different cultures all in the US and overseas and stuff like that. So we created best practices for our team, and we created areas. How do we communicate matters? Quality work matters. Don't we invest in training, and I have issues with people if you don't follow training guides and you don't and you don't get wrong, don't expect to get a positive reinforcement, right? You're gonna get if someone goes to trouble training you, you do whatever you feel like, and it doesn't work, expect to be smacked. Now, it says it much nicer than that. Embrace, because I had someone help me write it, not me, because I was like, mine was so this started out as how not to get fired, and it turned into how to create team best practices, which so
So
someone smarter than me.
you're very blunt, and the tact. I bet your tact score is fairly on. I'm low on tact too, but you probably need people who, especially if
Correct,
they're
and I know
writing
I
for
need.
you.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, you know
And
that.
then we said utilize project management. We talk about transparency and accountability, and
Hmm.
that's the tact part. I'm completely transparent. You didn't do the work. You screwed up. You did this 3 times. What am I supposed to do?
Hmm.
Right. And then some other kind of tactical stuff. But it was a really interesting exercise. Again, it was an hour. It wasn't a 27 things. It was like, okay, let's talk about how do we communicate? Right. Because I'm a direct. I deal with people in the Philippines. Their culture isn't direct. I get all
Hmm.
upset. No, it's just these are a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm sure you see this. They tend to be direct. They're busy. They're thinking about 50 things. Hey, you said you were gonna do this on Tuesday. Why didn't you do it on Tuesday?
Yeah,
Right. And then part of the reason why they have to think like that is because we don't have systems, because
yeah.
we don't have project management.
And that's part of the burden I think leaders and entrepreneurs carry is when you are a leader, you have to think about how not only how you are, but how that works in your world. And it's not that you necessarily need to, well, sometimes I think sometimes you need to know how you are and change it a little bit. It's nice to know what somebody else wants. Do they want to be praised publicly or privately? Like that's an unlock code that if you know that if you don't know that, you could really embarrass people and make them feel worse even when you're praising them. But if you know that, I feel like that's a secret unlock code to making sure they're getting what they need, and we all have that rule of praise publicly, reprimand privately, but some people don't even want to be praised publicly. So it's very, I don't know, it's just very interesting. You got to know it about yourself and you got to know it about your people, like some of these things. I think that's how you make good hiring decisions, and that's how you also make sure you're not burning out. I use that assessment as well to be like, here's where you're likely to burn out. Like if you're really high on this or low on this, this is what this looks like in a business setting world where that might cause you burnout. So,
Yeah, that's super interesting because I've been at what I've been doing for 5 years in this kind of version of myself.
mhm,
We tend to reinvent ourselves, right?
mhm,
And only 3 months ago did I have my leadership team do assessments.
mhm,
And what I learned was when I was saying something and they were the bottom scale, the opposite, that didn't commute. So, but then as a leader, you have to realize like you don't necessarily have to change because they're strength. In this case, their strengths, right? They're just
mhm,
not as strong. I didn't penalize. You can't penalize somebody for how they feel. You just have to understand as someone who's not as someone who's low on empathy. I have to get coached on that,
yeah,
but still, like they have to understand. Like we had someone who was too perfect on everything, and nothing was getting done. So
yeah,
at some point, there has to be a change. Had I known earlier on in the relationship, like so, we ended up having to make a change, and it was unfortunate. But the business needed that because you can't be so caught up with details and never finish anything.
yeah. There's very few professions where everything has to be perfect 100%. I mean,
Hopefully,
ideally, sure,
heart
but
surgeon,
yeah,
brain
surgeons, things like
surgeon.
that, but it's very I don't know. I use the big 5 with all of my clients. That's usually the first step. that we work like, usually they come and they read my book, or they take, I've got a couple of free quizzes on my website, and then they'll engage with me and say, "Hey, I've got some business stuff going on that I don't quite know how to figure out. I'm a business strategist." I get in there, but I have them take that assessment first, because it helps me know them, and it helps me know how to help them. And I only work with people in 4-week intervals. So I am very much so get in, get out, get in, fix the problem, get out, and then go on your way and do the thing, and then call me if you need me. So I am all about speed to action, and I don't have a month to get to know my client. I don't want to spend a month getting to know my client. I need to know who they are right now. And so that's what one way I use that assessment, is to really get to know who I'm working with, so that I know how to help them.
So Julie's on video. She's going, I've got Brian figured out and he's insane.
I have like, okay, here's where you score here. Here's where like I can go through it and be like, okay, tact, the visionary or
And
imagination. I really want to, I have a feeling I know where you are on change, but I would love to know where you are and where your team is.
I'm okay with it. My team hates it.
I see, but based on what you told me, I'm like, I don't know, man, 9 months to change something that you knew needed to be changed.
Oh, well, okay. So you're right. So, I think, and I learned something there too. So we'll put all the cards on the table. Hey, I'm sharing everything. This is the no ball, the whole part. I think part of it was I had to admit to myself I failed on the hiring position. I actually
Yeah, that's
probably
tough.
shouldn't have hired for that reason. I was hiring to fill a hole and not fill a need. I think is the term
You were
I'm
throwing
looking
money
for.
at a problem.
And I thought that they would just figure it out because it's not that hard. And it turns out it was incredibly hard, and they couldn't figure it out because of how we work so differently. Right now, it's easy to look back and diagnose it when have that.
Yeah.
And
Th-
I waited too long to make the decision. I hired quickly and fired slowly. I should have hired slowly and fired fast. So
Yeah.
as a result of it took me almost 4 months to hire this kind of account manager,
Uh-huh.
client success specialist, but I hired an operations manager in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I should have done the opposite,
But that
right?
was probably an exhausting, all of that was probably just the emotional wear and tear of that, of knowing, like, coming to grips with knowing that you made a decision that wasn't the best decision for
Oh, it
your
was hard. It
company.
took me almost 3 months to actually decide what was the end of the date. It
Yeah.
took me almost 3 months before I said, unfortunately, I just got upset and said,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to end this. Literally, we're going to end this conversation and then we're done. Cause
Yeah, so it's important to you clearly learned from that. I always say, "What did you learn from the burn?" Like, you learned from
I
that.
learned from the bird. This is, by the way, hey, you guys are listening to this. This is worth like $10,000 here. So just go on
But
you're learning live here.
I'll tell you what, the 2 things a lot of business owners do when they're burned out and they just want it to be fixed, or when there's a problem that could turn to burnout that they just want to be fixed, they either try to escape it through vacations or breaks or whatever, or just, like, ignoring it, or they throw money at it. So I kinda call it escaping both
Yeah,
ways,
I threw money at it.
and
And
hiring people that you don't need to hire because you just need a problem to go away, that's throwing money at a problem. And I've done it. I did it. I did it twice, and it sucked. And it just sucks, and it burned me out. Like, I didn't even wanna talk to the person, but they were working for me, and I had to talk to him every day, and it's just like, oh, it became I didn't even wanna go to work. Like, and this was my business that I had created. So I will say, if there's misery, misery loves company, if that makes you feel any better, the people who are listening, this is a common thing that business owners do,
no doubt, I would think
and
that
it's
I've certainly not. We've all done that. And the rub is that I did it twice. So I
yeah,
had someone in the same role. So what we decided to do with some help is that
mhm,
we rather than trying to find someone to fill the role, we eliminated the role and fixed the problem.
yeah,
So we changed kind of how we were addressing. We pushed the problem solving collaboratively to the team,
yeah,
saying, "Hey, these," and then we all have kind of different areas, and saying, "Okay, this is the big goal. This is your steps. These are your steps. In the next hour, we're going to figure out how to start to address the problem,
yeah,
and in the next 2 weeks, we're going to solve it." And then we just continued. And it basically, you know what it was? It was what our biggest problem was: communication.
mhm,
And as an entrepreneur, right? I became the I became the lightning rod for everybody, so they were all afraid to do anything until they touched base with me, and I was like,
mhm,
"No, no, no. You're empowered, you're empowered, you're empowered, and if you need it, go get help." And then
Yeah.
that person who was supposed to be helping them was saying, well, we got to get that from Bryan. So it was like we were not in sync, and realizing that we were not marching to the same drummer, and realizing that after the fact, I was my fault for not seeing that. And I beat myself up pretty badly for that. I really say that it was an expensive mistake, and most importantly, I can't get the time back. I can't recreate that time.
There's I feel like there's a book in me that's something along the lines of The Confessions of an Entrepreneur, and
There's your podcast, The
this is
Confessions of Crazy
probably
Entrepreneurs.
this is probably one of the deepest ones, and the thing that I tell my clients, because we've talked about gut instinct, and a lot of us do this go through this based on gut instincts because we don't do assessments, we don't do whatever it is, we don't check references, like, there's all kinds of things when we make a hire, but the thing that I've learned and the rule that I follow is that I don't impose my gut instinct on someone else's livelihood. So, I do not I I mean, if they don't fly with my gut instinct, they're probably not gonna make it through the first round of interviews, but I do not hire solely based on what my gut is saying about somebody because I have done that before, and it hasn't worked out. And I think that it's incredibly like, when it's only you who's really dealing with the consequences of that, yeah, you can handle it, but man, I that's the one place that I see gut instincts get real tricky for business owners, and so that's why I think it's really important to have other, other objective measures when you're hiring, before you pull that trigger, because it's a it's tough. You can't put the toothpaste back in the, tube.
That's hilarious. Yeah, because it's I mean, it's just open your eyes. So kind of the takeaway from what our conversation today is, one, be around other people that are smart. Two, assessments. So
Mhm.
tell me you can help any of our listeners. I
Yeah,
know
I
I
can
see on your website there's some quizzes, some assessments. So talk a little bit about that,
yeah.
how you can help, because again, we want this to be a resource, right?
Mhm.
So how can they get some help?
Yeah, so, I mean, I would say there's 2 quizzes on my site. One's about burnout, one's a little bit of a precursor to the Big 5 assessment. It's the work isn't working quiz. You can take both of those and kinda get some feedback on what's going on with you. And then from there, I mean, really you reach out to me, and like I said, everybody goes through an assessment, and I have an offer right now where you do the assessment, and then you get 60 minutes with me to walk through it for $300. That's what I offer right now. And, if you need to, you can reach out to me to get that offer. Just contact me via the website or DM me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at. So,
That, and by the way, that's a deal at 10 times the price. Because
oh
think
yeah,
about it,
usually
you
it's,
hire
yeah,
someone for 100 grand or whatever, 50 grand, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden
yeah.
you were solving the wrong problem for the wrong reason.
There aren't many people, business strategists, coaches, whatever, consultant, whatever you want to call me. There aren't many that work the way that I do. Which is I don't make there's no long-term commitment. It was 4 weeks. So, and even this is like, if you just wanna do the assessment, we can just do the assessment. And
That's awesome.
I bring in and I look at it from 2 things. I ask you to give me, okay, what's one business problem? One business problem you're dealing with right now. And then I also always look at it from a burnout perspective, and I have some studies around that I work on. But when we get together, I'm like, okay, we're gonna use this assessment. We're gonna walk through it. You're gonna understand why this is a problem, and you're gonna figure out how to fix it, or I'm gonna help you figure out how to fix it by the time we get done in the 60 minutes. I'm
That's
very
awesome.
action based. I don't I'm not the coach you come to for mindset shift. I'm the coach you come to when you need to get stuff done.
So tell me what's holding you back. You don't want to do that.
What?
So tell me what's holding you back. Is it the Socratic method is not your thing?
Yeah, no, not my thing. No, because
I, I
I
appreciate that.
and I have a coach who's I believe in that coaching. I have people I refer to when it's like, okay, this is a deeper thing that you need to, like, there's a crisis of meaning going on here. There's something going on here that I'm not gonna be able to help you with. So I believe in that type of coaching, but it's not me. It's not how I do it. So
I hear you, because it's not for everybody, right? So, but I think a lot of coaches lead with that because
mm,
that's what the quote unquote training teaches you. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? No, like a lot of times we're just like, okay, my hair's on fire.
like, what do you want to be different 4 weeks from now? That's what
Right.
I ask.
That's a really interesting approach.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think I don't, this could be like every one of these episodes is gonna be like 10 hours of like deep
Yes.
discussion. I don't want to do that. I want to
Yeah.
be mindful of everyone's time. Julie, I'm going to list on the show note a link for her burnout quiz and a link out for her what is it working quiz.
Work isn't working.
Work isn't working. I love the title. I haven't taken it, but I love the title.
Yeah.
And then her book link's available there too. So it's
Mhm.
going to be great
Yeah.
resource.
Those are some great cheap or free ways to kind of get my perspective and my just how I approach things, and then from there, reach out. I'm here and
And
ready to
we'll
help.
put your LinkedIn profile on there too.
Yeah.
So I'll
Mm.
make sure that we put all those on there. So that's how I found her. So, um, Julie, thank you so much for spending this time with everybody today. I wish you all the best. You got great energy. I haven't had coffee since this morning. I was thinking about taking a little chill, but I love having these conversations and giving back because I hope someone listening in their Maserati or their Maybach or their F-150, whatever they're driving, helping people out. I hope they get some nuggets to take away. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Brian.